I stood in the middle of the dry grass field of my new ranch in Willow Creek, Texas, the old DEA badge on my jacket glinting in the sunlight, while Ellen Voss's shouts echoed from the gate. "Put your hands where I can see them." She was screaming, frantic, as if I were a criminal caught red-handed. I didn't move, just stood there, watching her through the oak fence I'd just built, a solid boundary between my land and the crazy world she represented. Ellen was screeching that I'd locked her out of her territory, but she didn't know that the gate she'd just stepped through was a trap I'd set. She'd just walked herself into a federal investigation I'd been preparing for a long time, completely unaware. Yes, that's me. The guy who owns the private well that Ellen, the HOA queen of the nearby Sunny Hills, hooked her pipes into, without permission to water her damn garden.
What did I do when I found out?
I pumped livestock sewage into her system, and man, that was just the beginning. You're probably wondering how it all came to this. Let me tell you, it started a few months ago when I bought this ranch after 15 years of busting drug cases and watching suburbs turn into war zones behind white picket fences. I wanted peace, real peace. I wanted the sound of cattle mooing instead of gunshots, silence instead of police sirens, and a clear view of a starry sky not blocked by city smog. 20 acres in Willow Creek was my little slice of heaven, just outside the Sunny Hills boundary, at least on paper. That's where I made my first mistake. Thinking outside the boundary meant I'd be left alone by people like Ellen Voss. The day I moved in, I put up the fence first, not cheap barbed wire, but solid oak, tall enough to keep the cattle in and nosy people out. I drove each post in myself, sweat soaking my shirt, dry dirt sticking to my boots. My dog, Rusty, sprawled out under the shade of a nearby oak, panting. "You good, old buddy?" I asked, and he wagged his tail weakly, like he was agreeing this was home. But then Henry Tate, the nearest neighbor a mile away, showed up. The old guy drove his beat-up pickup to the gate, bringing a box of cookies from his wife. "Welcome to Willow Creek," he said, his voice raspy from cigarettes, his smile wrinkled but genuine. We sat on the steps, sipping cold beer from the cooler I brought. He told me about the land, the dry seasons, the storms, then lowered his voice. "Watch out for Ellen Voss. She's the HOA president of Sunny Hills, runs it like a prison camp, got a golf cart, flashing lights, and a clipboard always at her side. That fence of yours is gonna drive her nuts." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not part of Sunny Hills, she's got no say here." Henry chuckled, shaking his head. "You think that's enough? Ellen doesn't care about papers, she wants everything her way." His words jogged a secret I'd kept quiet. 20 years ago, as a young lawyer, I wrote the rules for the Sunny Hills HOA. I wanted to protect individual rights, making it clear no one could mess with private property outside the HOA boundary without consent. But after I joined the DEA, those rules had clearly been twisted. Now, standing on my own land, I wondered if I'd accidentally created the monster Ellen was steering. I didn't say any of that to Henry. I just took a sip of beer, eyeing the fence now glowing orange in the sunlight. A thought flashed in my mind: if Ellen Voss wanted trouble, she'd soon find out I wasn't just some retiree. I was the guy who wrote the rules, and I knew how to use them to guard what's mine. When Henry drove off, leaving a cloud of dust on the dirt road, I clapped my hands for Rusty. "Come on, old buddy. Looks like we've got some uninvited company coming." Rusty stood up, wagging his tail, and we headed inside. Outside the fence stood firm and silent, like a challenge. I had no idea that, just a few months later, Ellen would cross it, call 911, and drag herself into a mess she couldn't escape. I was out by the livestock barn, holding a bucket of water for the cattle, when I heard a faint engine noise from a distance. At first I thought it was a stray bee, but then it grew louder, joined by the sound of wheels rolling on dirt. I looked up, and saw a bright yellow golf cart trundling toward the gate of my Willow Creek ranch, flashing lights on top like it was a cop car. Behind the wheel was Ellen Voss, the Sunny Hills HOA president Henry Tate had warned me about. She wore a white polo shirt, cheap sunglasses, and clutched a clipboard like a weapon. I set the bucket down, wiped my hands on my pants, and walked to the oak fence to see what she wanted. Ellen stopped the cart right at the gate, didn't even get out, just leaned out the window, and yelled, "Hey you, what's this fence all about?" Her voice was shrill, like a busted alarm, making Rusty, my old dog, growl from under the oak tree. I crossed my arms, looking at her through the wooden slats. My fence, I said, calm as could be, keeps the cattle in, and folks like you out. She frowned, flipped a few pages on her clipboard, then pointed at the fence like it just broken the law. It's ruining Sunny Hills aesthetics. This wood color doesn't match our community palette. You need to paint it, white or light beige, I don't care, as long as it blends. I almost laughed, but kept a straight face. Sunny Hills is half a mile away. This is my land, not your turf. This fence has nothing to do with you. Ellen pushed her sunglasses down her nose, eyeing me like I was some idiot who didn't get it. Everything in sight belongs to us, she said, her tone like she was reading a manifesto. This fence is in view from Sunny Hills main road. It's dragging down our property values. I raised an eyebrow, stepped closer to the gate, hand on the wood. You're saying you can see it from half a mile? Good eyes, but I'll say it again, my land, not yours. You've got no authority here. She flipped more pages on her clipboard, scribbled something with a ballpoint pen, then tore off a sheet and shoved it through the gate's gap. This is an official warning, she said, smug as hell. Your fence violates community aesthetic standards. You've got 2 weeks to fix it, or I'll report it to the board. I took the paper, glanced at it, a mess of fancy words about visual harmony and community duty. I folded it, stuffed it in my pocket, and looked her dead in the eye. You know, Ellen, I've seen papers like this before. They're worthless without laws to back them up. And what's the law here? Private land's untouchable, unless the owner says otherwise. Sound familiar? She blinked, obviously not expecting me to push back like that. In my head, I smirked. 20 years ago, I wrote that exact rule for the Sunny Hills HOA, a clause to shield folks like me from folks like her. But I didn't say it, not yet. Ellen cleared her throat, regaining her swagger. You don't know who you're messing with, she said, jabbing a finger at me. I'll be back, and you'll comply. I shrugged. Go ahead. But if you cross this fence uninvited, I'll call it trespassing. And I don't go easy on trespassers. She glared, then hit the gas, the golf cart rolling off, kicking up a dust trail. Rusty barked once, like he was seeing her off. I patted his head, muttering, easy old buddy, she's just getting started. When Ellen's shadow disappeared, I pulled the paper from my pocket, read it again. A thought hit me. She didn't know who I was, didn't know I'd written the rules she was trying to bully me with. This fence wasn't just a boundary, it was a statement, and if Ellen wanted to play this game, I'd show her I played it better. I was brushing my old horse in the barn, wooden brush in hand, when I heard a faint buzz from above. At first I thought it was a bee straying into Willow Creek, but the sound grew louder, steady like an engine. I looked up, squinting in the sunlight, and saw it, a tiny shiny drone, hovering right over my barn, a few yards from the oak fence. Its lens glinted, obviously recording. I set the brush down, wiped my hands on my pants, and stepped outside for a better look. Rusty, my old dog, lifted his head from under the oak tree, growling low. I didn't need to guess who was behind this. Ellen Voss. She'd warned me about the fence, and now she'd decided to up her game by spying from the air. I stood there, watching the drone swoop back and forth, filming the barn, the fence, even my truck parked on the gravel drive. I waved at it, flashing a faint smile, then calmly walked inside. From the tool cabinet, I grabbed my 12-gauge shotgun, checked the shells, and stepped back out. Ellen wanted to play. Fine, I'd give her a Texas-style hello. I aimed straight at the drone, pulled the trigger, and the blast echoed through the quiet. The little machine shattered into plastic bits, dropping like confetti, scattering across the grass near the fence. Rusty barked once, like he approved. I shrugged, slung the gun over my shoulder, and headed back to the barn. But less than 20 minutes later, the intercom at the gate buzzed, followed by Ellen's shrill yell, "You destroyed my property, you're gonna pay for this." I walked to the gate, saw her standing there, face red, pounding the fence like she'd break it down. "That was my personal drone," she screamed. "You had no right to shoot it." I crossed my arms, staring at her through the slats. "You had no right to fly it over my land," I said, voice calm but firm. "Know the law, Ellen? Flying a drone over private property without permission is illegal. I've got a right to protect my privacy." Or do you need me to cite the exact statute for you? She blinked, clearly not expecting me to know this stuff. In my head, I grinned. 20 years ago, when I wrote the Sunny Hills HOA rules, I'd slipped in a subclause based on Texas law, no surveillance devices allowed over private land without consent. I wrote it to protect people like me from people like her. But I didn't say that. Let her dig her hole deeper first. Ellen took a deep breath, regaining her confidence. You just made a big enemy, she said, pointing at me through the gate. I'll sue you for destroying my property. The Sunny Hills Board will have you begging for mercy. I shrugged, stepping closer to the gate, hand on the wood. Go ahead and try, I said. But I'll tell you again, I've worked for the government longer than you think. You might want to watch what you say over that intercom. It could be recorded. She glared, lips pressed tight, then turned and stomped back to her golf cart parked a few yards away. This isn't over, she yelled before hitting the gas, leaving a dust trail. Rusty barked again, like he was chasing her off. I patted his head, muttering, "Good boy, old buddy. She doesn't know what she just stepped into." When Ellen's figure faded, I turned back to the drone's wreckage on the grass. I picked up a plastic piece, twirling it in my hand. She thought she could spy on me, use this junk to force me to bend. But she didn't know who I was, not just some retiree with a few cows, but the guy who wrote the rules she was trying to twist. This fence wasn't just a physical line, it was a declaration that I wouldn't let anyone mess with what's mine. And if Ellen wanted to push this further, I'd be ready to hit back my way. I started noticing my well, a few days after the drone incident. Everything was fine, until one early morning when I turned on the tap to water the cattle in the barn. The pressure dropped hard, water trickling out like someone had drained it. I frowned, checked the pressure gauge on the well, a little gadget I'd set up when I first moved to Willow Creek. The numbers jumped all over, especially around 4 a.m., when I was still fast asleep. I muttered to Rusty, my old dog sprawled near the barn. "Something's off, old buddy. Someone's messing with my well." I'm not the type to sit around waiting for problems to fix themselves. I grabbed my toolbox, hooked up a small monitor to the well system, the kind I used in DEA cases to track weird flows. For 2 days, I logged the data, and sure enough, pressure dipped sharp at odd hours, always early morning. I decided to check it out. That night, I threw on a jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and walked along the oak fence around the ranch. Rusty tagged along, nose sniffing the ground. It didn't take long to find it. Near the east corner of the fence, where the soil was softer, I spotted a tiny PVC pipe buried shallow, running from my well outward. I knelt, dug a bit with my hands, and followed it. The pipe snaked through the fence, straight toward Sunny Hills, right to Ellen Voss's flower garden, half a mile away. I stood up, clicked off the flashlight, and smirked in the dark. "She's stealing my water," I muttered to Rusty. "Watering her damn garden with my well. Pure genius, the dumbest kind of genius possible." I headed back to the house, mind racing with payback ideas. Ellen wasn't just spying with drones, she was stealing my water, a blatant violation of private property rights. I knew the law, she had no permit, no authority, and damn sure no permission from me. 20 years ago, when I wrote the Sunny Hills HOA rules, I made it clear, resources on private land belong to the owner, and any trespass could be sued. But I wasn't gonna sue her. Nah, I wanted her to feel the consequences, my way. Next morning, I checked the livestock waste tank at the ranch's edge, a stinking pit of gray water from the cattle barn, full of bacteria. I grinned slyly, pulled a hose from the shed, and got to work. I hooked the waste tank to the PVC pipe Ellen had rigged, careful so no one noticed. Then I opened the valve, letting the black muck flow back toward her garden. I stood there, hands on hips, picturing her rose beds drowning in stench. "Like free water, Ellen," I muttered. "Here's a gift from me." 2 days later, she showed up. I was on the porch, sipping coffee, when I heard that familiar golf cart rolling up to the gate. Ellen stepped out, face red, hair a mess, the stink on her clothes hitting me before she even spoke. "What did you do to my water system?" she yelled, slamming the fence. "My garden smells like a sewer. My flowers are all dead." I got up, walked to the gate, keeping cool. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "But if your water's got issues, maybe check where it's hooked up." "Got a permit for that pipe, Ellen?" She blinked, mouth gaping, then stammered, You sabotaged it. I know it was you. I shrugged, hand on the fence. I just protected my property, I said. If you tapped my well without asking, that's on you. Check your permits, then come talk. She glared, but I saw panic in her eyes. She knew she had no paperwork to back her up. Ellen spun around, stormed back to her golf cart, but not before shouting, I'll report this to the board. You're not off the hook. I watched her peel out, dust flying thick on the dirt road. Rusty barked once, like he was mocking her. I patted his head, chuckling, She hasn't learned yet, old buddy. But I'll teach her, step by step. I went back inside, knowing this was just the start. Ellen could sue all she wanted, but she didn't know I held the law in my hands, the law I'd written. My fence wasn't just a physical line, it was a reminder I wouldn't let anyone mess with what's mine, and if she kept going, I'd be ready to hit back harder. After the sewage stunt, I figured Ellen would lay low for a bit, at least to clean up her stinking garden, but I underestimated how stubborn she was. One morning, while I was feeding the cattle outside the barn at Willow Creek, I heard the mail truck stop near the gate. I walked over, found a thick envelope stuffed in the mailbox, my name scrawled on it in messy handwriting. I opened it, and inside was a petition from the Sunny Hills HOA, signed by dozens of people, demanding my land be annexed into their territory. The bolded line at the top read Jack Harlan is a threat to community safety and aesthetics. I laughed so hard, Rusty looked up from under the oak tree, staring like I'd lost it. Ellen wasn't kidding around. She'd gone door to door, collecting signatures, painting me as the bad guy to neighbors I hadn't even met. I skimmed the reasons, the ugly fence, the dog barking disturbance, and choking on my coffee territory, sabotaging community water. She had the nerve to blame me, after she'd tapped my well. I folded the paper, stuffed it in my pocket, and muttered to Rusty, She wants war, old buddy. Fine, I'll give her one to remember. I decided to play nice once before hitting hard. I invited the Sunny Hills HOA board to the ranch for a BBQ, a friendly get-to-know-you thing. I grilled ribs, set out cold beers, and opened the gate. Two showed up, Clara Dunn, a quiet middle-aged woman with neutral eyes, and Sarah Lopez, a single mom who seemed to dislike Ellen but was scared to say it. Ellen of course refused to come. I sat with them on the porch, sipping beer, and chatting. After a few cans, Clara blurted, Ellen wants us to vote to annex your land. She says an old rule lets us if we get enough signatures. Sarah nodded, adding she says you're a danger, but I'm not so sure. I raised an eyebrow, set my beer down. Did she mention the well? They both looked at me, clueless. I told them how Ellen tapped my well, how I pumped sewage back, and how she screamed at my gate. Clara's eyes widened. She didn't say any of that, she said. We had no idea. I smirked. She didn't want you to. But I know the law I wrote for Sunny Hills 20 years ago. No one can take resources from private land without consent. She broke it flat out. Sarah tilted her head. You wrote the rules for Sunny Hills. I nodded, keeping it short. Long time ago, before I joined the DEA. They didn't press, but I saw their eyes shift from doubt to curiosity. I didn't tell the full story that I'd been a young lawyer drafting rules to protect folks' rights, only to see them warped by people like Ellen. The talk ended with Clara promising to review the petition, but I knew Ellen wouldn't quit. That night, I got a call from Mike Torres, my old DEA team leader. I stepped outside, stood by the fence, listening through the phone. Jack, we need to talk serious, Mike said, voice low. Your ranch is near a cartel hotspot, a rural supply station. We're investigating, and you're in a perfect spot to watch. I frowned, glancing at the dirt road to the next ranch. I'm retired, Mike, I said, but if you need me, I'll keep an eye out. Mike chuckled. Knew you couldn't say no, but heads up, your Ellen Voss is stirring trouble. She filed a complaint with the county, calling you a risk. If she digs deeper, she could blow our cover. I gripped the phone, heat rising. She's not just a nuisance, I said. She's dangerous, but I'll handle her. I hung up, staring at the oak fence under the moonlight. Ellen wasn't just trying to control me, she was accidentally threatening a federal investigation I was quietly helping. I muttered to Rusty, lying near my feet, She wants to play big old buddy. I'll show her I don't just play, I wrote the damn rules. I went back inside, knowing this wasn't just personal anymore. It was a bigger game, and I wouldn't let Ellen ruin it. I started noticing weird signs a few days after the Sunny Hills board BBQ. One afternoon, while I was fixing the oak fence at Willow Creek, I heard an old car engine rumbling from a distance. I looked up, saw a rusty brown sedan parked behind some trees a couple hundred yards from the gate, engine still running. Through the windshield, I caught a glimpse of a guy with a long lens camera, aimed right at me. Rusty growled, ears up. I shrugged, muttering to him, "Looks like Ellen's not giving up, old buddy. She's got someone tailing me now." I wasn't too shocked. After the petition and the BBQ showdown, I knew Ellen wouldn't sit still. But a PI? That was a new move, dumb, but bold. I acted like I didn't care, kept hammering nails into the fence, but my mind was already working. I called Mike Torres, my DEA guy, that night. Standing on the porch, I whispered into the phone, "Mike, there's a guy watching me, parked near the gate, snapping pics non-stop. I think he's Ellen Voss's hire." Mike chuckled over the line. "She hired a detective for real? Girls got no fear. But watch out, Jack. If he's shooting the whole area, he might catch something of ours by accident." I frowned, looking toward the dirt road leading to the cartel suspect's ranch that Mike had mentioned in the last call. "What do you mean?" I asked. Mike lowered his voice. "Your neighbor, the ranch a mile away, is the main target. We suspect he's a money and chemical transfer point. If Ellen's detective snaps something, she could blow it." I gripped the phone tight, feeling a heat surge through me. "I'll handle it," I said. "But if she gets in deeper, I'll use her to trap him." The next day, I saw the sedan again. The detective, later I learned his name was Ray Cutler through an old contact in the biz, parked in the same spot, lens aimed at my barn and fence. But this time, I noticed him swiveling the other way, toward the suspect's ranch. I smirked to myself, muttering to Rusty, "She hired a dumbass old buddy. He doesn't know what he's shooting." I decided to let him keep going, no interference, no chase-off. If Ellen wanted to play spy, I'd let her dig her own grave. A few days later, Mike called back, voice urgent. "Jack, we've got a situation," he said. "We intercepted an email from Ellen Voss to a cartel contact, a middleman in Phoenix. She sent photos from her detective, thinking he's local law. The pics include you and the suspect's ranch." I froze outside the fence, night wind chilling me to the bone. "What the hell's she doing?" I asked. Mike gave a dry laugh. "She thinks she's ratting you out as a criminal, but instead of sending it to the cops, she sent it straight to a guy on our watch list. She just shoved herself into our case without knowing." I hung up, head spinning. Ellen wasn't just a nosy old lady anymore. She'd accidentally made a digital link the DEA could exploit. I muttered to Rusty, lying near my feet, "She's dumb as hell, and perfect old buddy. I don't even need to do anything. She's handing herself over." But I knew this was risky. If Ellen kept poking around, she could expose Mike's investigation, and me too. I couldn't let that happen. I went inside, grabbed my laptop, and checked the surveillance system I'd set up around the fence after the drone mess. I rewound the footage, saw Ray Cutler wasn't just snapping me. He'd caught a strange truck parked near the suspect's ranch at night, something Ellen had surely sent off. I grinned faintly. "She thinks she's ruining me," I said to Rusty. "But she just gave me ammo to take down a whole ring." I knew the law I wrote for Sunny Hills, didn't shield trespassers like her. And now, with the DEA on my side, I'd let Ellen dig herself deeper until she couldn't climb out. I knew Ellen wouldn't stop, but I didn't expect her to be this reckless. One late night, while I was sleeping in the house at Willow Creek, the alarm from the fence surveillance system went off like crazy. I bolted up, threw on jeans and a t-shirt, grabbed the shotgun off the wall, and stepped outside in old boots and boxers. Rusty, my old dog, barked like mad, trotting behind. I glanced at the camera feed on my phone, and sure enough, Ellen Voss, holding a crowbar, stood near the livestock gate, trying to pry the lock. She had camera glasses on her face, phone in her other hand, obviously filming. I stepped out, shotgun over my shoulder, flashlight beaming right at her. "What the hell are you doing, Ellen?" I yelled, voice cutting through the still night. She jumped, the crowbar clattering to the ground, but she snapped back to aggression fast. You cut off my water, she hissed, pointing at me. I'm here to restore my community rights. I raised an eyebrow, closing in on the fence. Community rights? You tapped my well without asking. I just took back what's mine. Now get off my land before I call the cops. But Ellen didn't budge. Instead she screamed, "You don't get to order me around," and lunged at the gate, trying to shove it open. I quick locked it from inside, hearing her pound on the wood. Then she did something I didn't see coming, pulled out her phone, dialed and shrieked into it. 911. I need help. I'm Ellen Voss, Sunny Hills HOA president. This guy's holding me hostage. He's a danger. I stood there, stunned, almost laughing. Hostage? She broke onto my land, and now I'm the kidnapper. I muttered to Rusty. She's lost it for real, old buddy. But I didn't have time to joke. I heard sirens in the distance. Sheriff Dan Carver was coming. I knew Dan from some old DEA cases. He's calm, gets it. When his car pulled up near the fence, headlights lighting everything up, I saw Ellen run out, arms flailing, yelling, "Arrest him. He's got me trapped." Dan stepped out, hand on his belt, looking at me through the fence. I raised my hands, showed him my old DEA badge. "Dan," I said, "steady. She trespassed, tried to break my gate. I locked it to keep her out. No holding anyone here." Dan nodded, glanced at Ellen, now pacing like a caged animal. "Ellen, chill," he said. "What's he saying?" She spun, face red. "He cut my water. He's a threat. I'm HOA president. I've got rights to check." I stepped closer to the gate, locked eyes with her. "You've got no rights here," I said. "I wrote the Sunny Hills HOA rules 20 years ago. Clause 3. No trespassing on private property outside the HOA boundary without consent. You broke my own law, Ellen." She blinked, mouth gaping, like her brain just shorted out. You wrote the rules?" she stammered. I nodded, badge still in hand. "Yeah, and I know how to enforce them. You just broke onto a former DEA agent's land while I'm assisting a federal investigation. You should thank me for not shooting you." Dan raised an eyebrow, looking at me. "Federal investigation?" he asked. I nodded slightly. "Cartel, nearby." She stumbled into it, but now she's screwing it up more. Ellen backed off, face pale, but still yelled, "No way. I'm the community protector." Dan sighed, stepped toward her. "Ellen, if he's telling the truth, you're in deep trouble. I need you to leave now, or I'll arrest you for trespassing." She glared, but finally stomped back to her golf cart, tossing out, "This isn't over." As she drove off, Dan looked at me, smirked. "She doesn't know who you are, huh?" I shrugged. "She does now. But I'm worried she won't stop." I went back inside, shotgun still over my shoulder, Rusty trailing behind. I knew Dan had been briefed on the DEA investigation by Mike Torres. He wouldn't interfere, but he'd watch Ellen. She'd just put herself in the crosshairs, and I felt the DEA gearing up to move. I muttered to Rusty, "She wants to call 911. Fine, old buddy. Next time I'll let them cuff her." The fence stood there, silent under the moonlight, witnessing Ellen's stupidity, and my patience running thin. I figured after the break-in and 911 call, Ellen would back off to lick her wounds, but I underestimated her craziness again. A few days later, while I was checking the oak fence at Willow Creek, my phone rang. It was Mike Torres, DEA team leader. I picked up, heard his half-laughing, half-serious voice. "Jack, you know Ellen Voss just accused you of stashing drugs in your barn." I froze, hand gripping the fence. "What?" I asked, voice pitching up a bit. Mike explained. "She filed a complaint with the county, attached phone pics, fertilizer bags and cattle feed in your barn. She says they're suspiciously stacked and smell like chemicals. She thinks she's busted a meth lab." I almost laughed, but then it hit me. "That's fertilizer and cow feed," I said. "She smelled manure, not chemicals." "But how'd that complaint get to you?" Mike lowered his voice. "County passed it to the drug squad per protocol. A guy on my team got it and called me right away 'cause he knows you." I sighed, glancing at Rusty sprawled near the barn. "She's nuts for real, old buddy," I muttered to him. But in my head, a light bulb went off. Ellen wasn't just a pain, she was threatening to expose the cartel investigation Mike and I were quietly backing. If this complaint went further, it could draw unwanted eyes to my ranch, and the suspects nearby too. I told Mike, "Don't touch it yet. Hold the complaint, I see an opening here." "Opening for what?" Mike asked, curious. I smirked. "Ellen's dumb but useful. If she wants to play accuser, I'll give her something to accuse, and use her to trap my neighbor." Mike went quiet, then laughed loud. "You're one sly bastard. All right, I'll let you run it. But be careful, she could screw everything if she goes too far." I hung up, stepped inside, and called Mike's team for an emergency meet. That night, 3 of them rolled up, Mike, an agent named Pete, and a tech guy, all in an unmarked car, parked discreetly behind the barn. I laid it out. We'd set a fake barrel outside the barn, labeled Fertilizer 50, harmless, but sketchy looking. Then we'd put on a show. Pete and I would stand by the fence, talking loud about delivery times and transport routes, enough for any eavesdropper to think something's up. "Ellen'll come back with a drone or her PI, I said. "She'll snap pics, send them off, and walk right into the trap." Mike nodded. "If she sends pics to the cartel middlemen like last time, we'll have a direct link. She'll be our unwilling messenger." Pete chuckled, without even knowing it. "Perfect." We set the fake barrel that night, an old metal drum, sloppily labeled, left outside the barn, under the moonlight. Next morning, Pete and I stood by the fence, acting it up. "Delivery at 3 a.m., I said loud. "Don't let anyone spot the truck." Pete nodded, adding roads through the back road, dodge the streetlights. I knew Ellen wouldn't miss the chance. Sure enough, 2 days later, I heard that familiar buzz overhead. A new drone, flying higher than before, circling the barn and fake barrel. I faked panic, rushed to cover the barrel with a tarp, making it look shadier. Rusty barked like crazy, adding drama. I grinned to myself, muttering to him, "She's hooked, old buddy." That night, Mike called back, voice buzzing. "Jack, you nailed it. Ellen sent drone footage to the cartel middleman. She wrote, 'I've got proof of competition. Want a deal?' She thinks she's ratting you out, but she's pitching to a guy on our blacklist." I gripped the phone, laughing hard. "She just sold herself to the DEA without knowing," I said. "What now?" Mike replied. "He agreed to meet her. We'll track it. If she takes one more step, she's done." I hung up, looking out at the fence under the porch light. Ellen thought she was winning, but she didn't know I'd written the rules, and now I was using them to trap her. She wanted to accuse me of drugs. Fine, I'd let her turn herself into a real criminal. I knew Ellen had backed herself into a corner after sending the drone footage to the cartel middleman, but I didn't expect her to go this far. Mike Torres called me one early morning, voice rushed. "Jack, she's meeting the guy right at your fence, 4:30 this afternoon. She's bringing a USB with the footage, wants to trade for action against you." I stood on the porch at Willow Creek, eyeing the oak fence, and smirked. "She picked my land for the deal?" I asked. Mike gave a dry laugh. "Yup, dumbest or gutsiest, can't tell. We'll ambush, you stay as bait." I agreed on the spot. This was the shot to end Ellen's circus, and help the DEA nab the middleman. I muttered to Rusty, lying near my feet, "She thinks she's a hero, old buddy. But today, she's turning crook." Mike's team rolled in before the meet, hiding in an unmarked car behind the barn. Pete, the agent from before, played the middleman, wired up with an earpiece. I stood by the fence, pretending to fix the gate, waiting. At 4:30 sharp, I heard Ellen's golf cart rumble up. She stepped out, in her white HOA polo, camera glasses on, clutching a tiny USB like it was a golden ticket. Pete walked out from the dirt road, playing it cool, low voice, stone face. "You got the goods?" he asked. Ellen, brimming with confidence, held up the USB. "Everything's here," she said. "Suspicious deliveries, chemical barrels, illegal setup. I've got proof this guy's a threat. I want you to do something, get him out of here." I stood a few yards off, hearing every word through the earpiece Mike gave me. She'd crossed the line, not just accusing me, but asking for illegal action from someone she thought was an ally. Pete nodded. Asked, "What's your price?" Ellen lowered her voice, but the camera glasses caught it. I want the community safe. He's a danger to us. I need you to make sure he's gone. That was it. The confession to nail her for conspiracy and obstruction. Before Pete could reply, Ellen pulled the dumbest move yet. She called 911 right there. I'm dealing with a criminal. She yelled into the phone. I need cops here now to enforce compliance. I almost laughed, but the DEA sprang. Mike and 2 agents burst from cover, guns on Ellen. Drop the phone, Mike shouted. She let it fall, face white, stammering, "Who are you? I'm helping here." I stepped up, DEA badge glinting in the sun. "No, Ellen," I said. "You just tried to deal with a cartel suspect, peddled fake info, and falsely accused a federal agent. That's obstruction of justice, conspiracy and illegal surveillance on my land." She blinked, stared at me, then at Pete, who ditched the earpiece. "No way," she screamed. "I'm HOA president, I protect Sunny Hills." I shook my head. "You broke the rules I wrote for Sunny Hills 20 years ago. Clause 3, no trespassing on private property. You're done." Mike cuffed her, read her Miranda rights, while she kept yelling about community bylaws. The USB got confiscated, camera glasses yanked off. As they shoved her in the car, she shouted, "I need a lawyer." I shrugged, muttering to Rusty, "She needs a miracle more, old buddy." Sheriff Dan Carver pulled up right after, briefed by Mike. He nodded at me. "Good work, Jack. She brought this on herself." But I wasn't done. With Ellen locked up, I targeted the Sunny Hills HOA. I dug through her old papers, the petition stuff, and found proof she'd misused HOA funds to hire Ray Cutler and buy drones, unreported to the board. I bundled it into a file, sent it anonymously to every Sunny Hills resident. Then I threw another by BQ, invited them all to the ranch. Clara Dunn and Sarah Lopez led the pack, bringing dozens grumpy old men to young moms once scared of Ellen. I stood on the porch, laid it all out. The well theft, drones detective, and how Ellen nearly tanked a federal investigation. "I wrote the Sunny Hills rules to protect you," I said, holding up an old copy. "But she turned them into a control tool. Time to take your rights back." Sarah asked, "How?" I grinned. "Final clause, if 60% of residents vote to dissolve the HOA, it's gone. You decide." A week later, they voted. 68% said yes. Sunny Hills HOA crumbled, and I got panicked emails from the old board, asking if it was legit. I sent back one word, confirmed. Ellen got officially charged, obstruction of justice, conspiracy, illegal surveillance. She didn't know I'd used my own rules to take her down. My fence stood there, silent, watching it all. I stood on the porch at Willow Creek, holding a hot coffee, looking out at the oak fence, now weathered in the early sun. Ellen Voss was out of my life. After the arrest, she got 2 years probation, hefty fines, and had to sell her Sunny Hills house to pay up. I heard she moved to a small town with no HOA, an ironic end that makes me chuckle whenever I think of it. Rusty, my old dog, stretched out beside me, breathing steady, like he felt the quiet finally settle in too. Sunny Hills changed after the HOA fell apart. No more Ellen, no more sloppy warning letters or golf cart prowling. The place came alive. I saw kids playing in yards, not scared of getting chewed out for toys ruining the look. One morning, Sarah Lopez, who doubted Ellen at the BBQ, came to my gate with a handwritten note. She slipped it under the fence, smiling through the slats. I opened it, read the scribbled line, "Thanks for giving us our neighborhood back." I kept that note, set it on the kitchen table like a keepsake. I never thought I'd end up some reluctant hero. When I wrote the Sunny Hills rules 20 years ago, I just wanted to guard individual rights, not tear it all down myself. But looking back, I see peace doesn't come free. It takes facing down people like Ellen, ones who'll control everything until they trip over themselves. I muttered to Rusty. She thought she could cross my fence, old buddy. But I wrote the rules, and I knew how to use them. I walked to the gate, locked it, not out of fear, but principle. I hung a small sign beside it, simple words: trespassers will be shot, survivors will be questioned. Neighbors laughed when they saw it, but I wasn't kidding. This fence was my line, a reminder I'd fought to keep it, and I won. I looked up at the sky, stars twinkling like my first night here. No more drones, no more detectives, just cattle mooing and wind rustling dry grass. I sipped my coffee, feeling the real peace I'd craved. Ellen might have tried, but she didn't know that around here, we remember what happens when someone dares cross my fence, and we don't let it happen twice. The story reflects a very real slice of life in the U.S. Today, the tension between individual rights and community pressure, especially in neighborhoods with HOAs, homeowners associations. In the story, Jack Harlan stands for Americans who value personal freedom and private property, while Ellen Voss represents the type who abuse petty power to control others, a common sight in U.S. suburbs. Ellen's actions, from spying with drones, stealing Jack's well water, to making false accusations, mirror the rise of neighbor disputes in an age of modern tech and ignorance about legal boundaries. On the flip side, Jack, with his DEA background and role in writing HOA rules, shows a deep grasp of the law and how to wield it to protect himself, a vital skill in an American society where the legal system is king. The lesson here applies to real life in the U.S. today. Know your rights and responsibilities, and handle boundary pushers smartly and legally. When Ellen broke past Jack's fence and called 911, she didn't expect he'd have evidence and rules ready to strike back, a reminder that in a law-driven society like America, understanding the system like Jack, knowing the HOA rules he wrote, is key to self-defense. Instead of letting emotions rule like Ellen, stay cool, gather proof like Jack's camera footage, and use the legal system to settle scores. Plus, Jack dissolving the HOA proves sometimes you need bold moves to fix an unfair setup, but it takes consensus and strategy, like convincing 68% of Sunny Hills residents. In real life, this means don't shy from standing up to overreach, whether it's a nosy neighbor or an oppressive group, but do it with prep and respect for those around you. Jack's fence wasn't just physical, it was a symbol of personal boundaries every American should learn to guard, especially in a time when privacy's more vulnerable than ever. If you liked the story of how Jack defended his fence against Ellen, and want to see more clever battles like this, subscribe to the channel today so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video, where we'll dig into more tales of power, rules, and peace in America.